The Battle of Ismailia took place between the Egyptian army and the Israeli Defense Forces during the last stages of the Yom Kippur War during October 18–22, 1973, south of the city of Ismailia on the west bank of the Suez Canal in Egypt. The battle itself took place as part of the larger IDF-launched Operation Abiray-Lev, in an attempt to seize Ismailia and thereby sever the logistical and supply lines of most of Egypt's Second Field Army across the Suez Canal, breaking out of the newly established bridgehead west of the canal at the northern end of the Great Bitter Lake. The IDF launched an offensive from Deversoir toward Ismailia. A combined force of Egyptian paratroopers and commandos fought a delaying battle, falling back upon defensive positions further north under increasing pressure from IDF infantry and armor. By October 22, they were occupying a last line of defense, including positions along the Ismailia Canal. Though outnumbered, they repulsed a final Israeli effort to capture the city. A United Nations ceasefire was then imposed, bringing the battle to an end. The Egyptians registered a tactical and strategic victory in the defense of Ismailia, stopping an encirclement of their large forces on the east bank of the Suez Canal and ensuring the supply lines remained open. Background: on October 6, 1973, Egypt launched Operation Badr, which started the Yom Kippur War. It succeeded in crossing the Suez Canal and establishing bridgeheads on the east bank in Israeli-occupied Sinai, and counter-attacks launched by Israeli reserves were unsuccessful. By October 10, fighting along the front had come to a lull. Egyptian President Anwar Sadat soon ordered an offensive to seize the strategic Sinai mountain passes. Despite protests and objections by his senior commanders against such an offensive, Sadat hoped to divert Israeli pressure from the Syrians. The October 14 offensive was ill-planned and ill-executed, and culminated in heavy Egyptian losses without achieving any objectives. The failed Egyptian offensive gave the initiative to the Israelis, who immediately launched Operation Abiray-Lev, aiming to cross the canal between two Egyptian armies in order to encircle Egyptian forces on the east banks and cut the supply lines. Optimistically planned, the operation began smoothly, but quickly ran into problems. The Israelis faced difficulties in establishing a corridor to the canal due to unexpectedly determined resistance by Egyptian defenses, in what became known as the Battle of the Chinese Farm. After several days of heavy fighting, they were able to secure the roads to the canal, and by October 18 had two bridges laid down at Deversoir, at the northern end of the Great Bitter Lake. By the next day there were 3 Israeli armored divisions across the canal. 2 advanced south toward Suez City, while the 143rd Armored Division under Major General Ariel Sharon advanced north to seize Ismailia, hoping to sever the supply lines to 3 Egyptian divisions of the Second Field Army across the canal. Prelude: the west bank of the canal was lined with a series of ramparts up to 30 meters high, which the Egyptians referred to as strong points. These were used during the opening days of the war to allow Egyptian forces to directly fire on the Israelis on the east bank. There were 5 strong points between the Great Bitter Lake and the Ismailia Canal, from north to south. A pumping station at Deversoir, the village of Serabium, Tuscan, Henaidak and Jebel Mariam. The area was largely agricultural, intersected with dikes and irrigation ditches, although these did not present significant obstacles. There were several villages and numerous farms, especially orchards of mango and orange trees. The density of foliage made the terrain unsuitable for vehicles. The Israelis called it the Jungle or Vietnam. West of the Suez Canal, and running parallel to it, was the Sweetwater Canal, which distributed fresh water to the inhabitants of the canal zone and its cities. It branched from the Ismailia Canal, running east from the Nile River near Cairo to Lake Timsah at Ismailia. There were 4 bridges across the Ismailia Canal. The first was the Abu Ghamis Bridge at Ismailia. 2 bridges, one railroad and one vehicular, were located at the village of Nafisha on the western outskirts of Ismailia. Further west was the Upper Bridge, as it was called. Engineers had wired the bridges with demolition charges for destruction should they fall to the Israelis. Second Army's reserve included the 10th and 118th Mechanized Infantry Brigades, with the latter occupying a series of fortified defenses on the northern bank of the Ismailia Canal. The 182nd Paratrooper Brigade, comprising the 81st, 85th and 89th Battalions under the command of Colonel Ismail Azmi, was assigned responsibility for defending the area south of Ismailia against an Israeli offensive. Azmi arrived at Nafisha with the bulk of his brigade at midnight on October 17, where he was briefed by Brigadier General Abdelmunim Khalil, commander of 2nd Army. Khalil identified the West Bank's strong points as objectives for the paratroopers to secure, as the ramparts could be used to provide fire support to Egyptian forces on the East Bank. The paratroopers would also hold Serabium and the bridges that are over the Sweetwater Canal. The 85th Paratrooper Battalion, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Atef Monsif, had been involved in a recent counter-attack against Deversoir. Despite breaking through in certain areas and even seizing part of the airstrip at Deversoir, the paratroopers and the supporting armor were greatly outnumbered and the counter-attack failed. The battalion suffered around 100 dead, missing or wounded, and by dawn on October 18 it had been pulled back to Inshas military base for reorganizing. The only other Egyptian forces in the area were commandos, the 73rd Battalion of the 129th Sa'ika Group. The Sa'ika had also been engaged in heavy fighting at Serabium, Deversoir and the nearby military base of Abu Sultan. By late October 17, the battalion's 2 companies had been ordered to withdraw from the vicinity of Deversoir northward to defend Serabium. On October 18, Sharon's division across the canal included the 243rd Paratrooper Brigade under Colonel Danny Matt and an armored brigade under Colonel Haim Erez. Sharon, wanting to expand the Israeli bridgehead northward, received permission to cross a 3rd unit, an armored brigade under Colonel Amnon Reshef, to the west bank, and did so on October 19. The paratroopers and part of the armor had been holding the Israeli bridgehead since October 16, facing little resistance, while Reshef's brigade had been involved in heavy fighting at the Chinese farm until it was relieved by Israeli reinforcements.